A major Republican showdown took place in Ohio this week, and all eyes were on Trump's campaign clout.
We have to elect Bernie to get in there and to seal our border, stop inflation, crush the deep state, drill, baby, drill, and prevent World War III.
The Buckeye State held its GOP primary for Senate to see who will take on Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown in the fall. And Trump-backed Bernie Marino, a former car dealer and blockchain entrepreneur, came out on top against State Senator Matt Dolan, a vocal anti-Trumper.
We're going to win this race in November. We're going to retake the United States Senate. We're going to have President Trump in the White House.
The race illustrated the battle lines between the former president's MAGA movement and Ohio's GOP establishment. It's time to go on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science from Decision Desk HQ. Scott, as always, it's great to see you. This was a major test on Trump's influence over what could shape Senate control this fall. What is the main takeaway from the Ohio primary?
Well, Trump's endorsement, it certainly helped out Bernie Marino. Not only did he win, but he outperformed his polling. Now, the Democrats did spend in the final week supporting Bernie Marino because that is their preferred candidate to run against. But, you know, Donald Trump came out, did a rally. Bernie Marino is on pace to significantly outpace his polling. You know, if you ask both sides, the Republicans think they got the candidate they want, and the Democrats got the matchup on the Republican side they want. So this will be a real close race for control of the Senate this fall.
So on that point about Democrats propping up Bernie Marino, isn't there some risk involved in that? Because I remember in 2022 when Senator J.D. Vance was running, he was backed by Trump. He embraced Trump, and it seemed to work out well for him ultimately in the general election. You know, did Democrats prop up the wrong candidate?
You know, it's entirely possible. It didn't work for them, as you noted, in the last cycle. And you know what? Ohio is a tough state for Democrats to win. I think, you know, everyone thinks of Ohio as a battleground, but interestingly enough, the state Senate, state House, and obviously governor, and half the congressional delegation and Senate is controlled by the Republicans. So, you know, on paper, it feels like a swing state, but in reality, it is not. The Democrats are just trying to pick a candidate that's going to give them an edge here, and so they thought that was Bernie Marino. I think when DDHQ releases its ratings later this summer, it's going to be a lean Republican, or at least open there, despite Sherrod Brown being a very good candidate and obviously an incumbent senator. Democrats are just trying to play the odds here and give themselves a little bit of a better chance, but we'll see if it works. As you pointed out, it didn't work for J.D. Vance.
Yeah, and worth noting that Sherrod Brown is the last statewide elected Democrat in Ohio, so certainly formidable, but a tough road ahead for him. Scott, what are other states that we're seeing battle lines drawn between Trump and other conservatives?
Well, one I'd like to point out, not so certainly battle lines, is we had a poll out today. Maryland, former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan, ahead of his potential Democratic primary opponents. Or, I'm sorry, general election opponents. And it's interesting. Larry Hogan, not a Trump supporter, so to speak, very vocally not. Donald Trump basically saying, I'm not going to say anything bad against him. It'll be interesting to see whether there is a MAGA candidate that comes out in that GOP primary that goes against him. If Trump can keep his mouth quiet and see if he can stay out of that. That's certainly one to look at. We talked about Montana last time. I'm on Montana. You know, Donald Trump ended up endorsing and clearing the field, getting Matt Rosendale out. You know, he's definitely flexing his muscle and certainly setting himself up to be a player if the Republicans keep the House and retake the Senate.
Yeah, it's interesting because we know that, you know, Senate Republicans in the campaign arm, I should say, have been very supportive of Larry Hogan, while also supportive of more Trumpian candidates like Kari Lake in Arizona. Scott, Decision Desk has Trump's lead over President Biden narrowing down to just 7.7%. Is there any new data coming in that could turn his lead into a loss?
You know what? We are now getting into the very early stages of the general election. I think you're going to see this type of tightening lead. We'll probably see Joe Biden maybe go ahead as he starts advertising. But I think we're going to see this back and forth. Notably, we are a little bit more than 10 days after the State of the Union. So there's a lot of polls that had come out post that. And so I think we're seeing some tightening there. This is a little bit nerdy, but for your audience, a lot of these polls are looking at general electorate registered voters. We're going to see a lot of polls later this summer where they just look at likely voters. And so that's where I think we might see it flip or certainly tighten even more. This is just the opening innings, and we'll see it go back and forth, I think.
And so, and I know we're, obviously, like you said, in the opening inning and you don't have a crystal ball, but I got to ask, if the election were held today, does decision desk analysis show Trump winning comfortably?
So that is a great question. And here's how I like to answer this one. We're going to have a statistical model where I'm going to give you a percentage here in the next couple of months. We've got it now that we're out of the primary, get out of there. I'm going to present it this way. Let's say I have $1,000 to bet. I can bet anywhere from $0 to $1,000. And if I bet $1,000, I'm absolutely sure of the outcome. If I bet $0, I have no idea the outcome. Right now, I would bet on $100 that Donald Trump wins this fall. Wins this fall based on where we're at. So I'm a little bit sure he's slightly ahead, but I'm nowhere near $1,000 going to bet the house on it.
Huh. Interesting. So, Scott, the biggest concern for both candidates will be the 7 key battleground states, starting with Arizona. What are your latest numbers showing?
Arizona just had a primary last night. That was an easy call for both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Their counting hasn't gotten any better. We're going to still be waiting for results for another week. Arizona could be the tipping point state, the one that we need to know to call the presidential election this fall, and it's going to take a week there. The polling's got to sort itself out. I mean, that one keeps going back and forth. If you show the average up here, I think you'll see Donald Trump has a slight lead. But again, that's under those registered voter polls. Once we get those likely voter ones out, I think we're going to see that lead tighten.
So Trump recently said, quote, any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion and everything about Israel. We know Jewish Americans tend to lean Democratic, but I got to ask, is Trump throwing away an opportunity with this constituency by making those comments?
It certainly doesn't help him. And I think the argument for the Trump campaign, and we see it, is it's a great line for him to fundraise. It's also a great line for the Democrats to fundraise, right? Like, he's not very articulate about how he's saying it, but basically what he's saying is, I am, more supportive of Israel than the Democrats are. It's not the greatest way to say it, but to the certain amount of Jewish Americans who might resonate with that, it works for them. It does turn a lot of them off. It does create a lot of news headlines. And there's a lot of Democrats making a lot of campaign noise about it. You know what? We've seen Trump say this kind of stuff for the last 5, 6, 7 years. It's never the thing that takes him down. It's the thing that polarizes him. Some people will dislike him more because of it. Some people will like him even more because of it. It just splits down the middle.
And speaking of Trump's remarks, he recently was talking about a potential trade war with China and warned of a, quote, bloodbath if Biden is elected. Are Republicans concerned about Trump's rhetoric and tone at this point?
If this were summer of 2015, early 2016, I would say yes. But at this point, again, this is stuff he's been saying 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And this is the stuff he's been saying. And voters on the Republican side and party elites on the Republican side have had opportunity to push back on it. And now they just kind of rally around it, or they don't necessarily acknowledge it. I think these types of statements, they're the norm for Donald Trump. From his point of view, it's worked for him, and he's going to continue to do this kind of stuff going forward.
Shifting gears to President Biden, are we seeing any states, in addition to Michigan and Minnesota, calling for Democrats to vote uncommitted during the primaries?
There are a few left. You know what? I should know this off the top of my head. I think we're going to see a few out west here in the next month or so, and then we're going to see a few more in the southeast. So that's certainly going to be a little bit of a story. As you know, Joe Biden has officially clinched enough pledged delegates. Now he's going to have to officially go through the process in the convention here in a few months, but he's there. The uncommitted, was a great story a couple of weeks ago. There's probably going to be a couple of more states here. He might even, they might even get into the 5, 10, low double digits. But that largely has gone away, and that's not going to be as much of a thing anymore. What it is good for the Joe Biden campaign, it really identifies those people they got to go after, and it gives them some targets in places like Michigan and a few other places that they definitely need to show up. Joe Biden needs Michigan this fall if he's going to be president.
So, Scott, you just mentioned Michigan, but if you were working on the Biden campaign, what other states would you be making the biggest push in?
So I'm all about correlation, right? Like, if Joe Biden loses Michigan, he's probably losing Wisconsin, and it doesn't look good in Pennsylvania, right? So not only Michigan, but Wisconsin, the polling for Donald Trump looks really good in those 3 states right now. Now, there's a long way to go, but if he's worried about Michigan, he should be worried about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania too, and he's going to need those 3 states, especially if the conventional wisdom is Georgia's probably out of his reach this time around, so he's going to need to hold on to those upper Midwest states. If he's worried about Michigan, he needs to be worried about Wisconsin and Pennsylvania.
Scott Tranter from Decision Desk HQ, thank you so much for your insight as always.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it for What's America Thinking. Come back next week and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And we want to hear from you. Leave us your comments and let us know what's on your mind.